Okay, I think I might be going. Let me test a few things out real quick. Internet is terrible tonight. Let me go back to home. Want to make sure that I've got everything up and running. I see something going on. Get on this one. Golly, I can't believe my stinking. Aha, there it is. Alright, cool. So, let me just go ahead, pull up some things. I hate Microsoft Edge, but it's the thing that works the best with my thing, right? Let me click in here. Everything is painfully slow tonight, apparently. Okay, cool. I'm seeing some displays. Alright, so with that being said, I'm pretty sure that the sound is alright. Let me turn up my volume. Let me click in here. Yes, sir, that works. Alrighty, so I guess if anybody watches tonight, hello and welcome. If you watch this after the fact, well, hello and welcome still. In my previous video, which should have just uploaded a little while ago, it took me all day to get it uploaded. I talked about some of the things I've changed my mind on recently. One of those things being rules as written. Now, some of you that have visited my channel in the past probably remember that I've been a little bit more hardcore about rules as written, and I've kind of chilled out of that position as time has gone on. I am a big believer in rules light systems, so that if you do have to do away with something, it's not going to be a big deal. Because I'm of the particular opinion that, especially within the OSR community, the quote community, I hate that word really, but within the OSR circles, whatever term you wish to use, the concept that you have to run rules as written, otherwise it's like a Jenga tower and it all falls apart, is, I wouldn't say that position is not true, but I would say it's greatly exaggerated. Because at that point, if you are changing so much, you're playing a different rule system to begin with. And to be honest with you, I kind of think that that's the whole point of at least old school gaming, right? And I'm going to kind of make a point by simply consulting what is my favorite OSR retro clone, and that's Whitebox. So we're going to get started. This is not going to be a complete read through, but I'm going to get to my points about why you don't have to be so hardcore about rules as written. It's kind of a position I've come to recently in the past. I actually need to. Shucks, I forgot to bring up that document, and I really don't want to dig through it again. It'll be alright. But anyway, I can just prove my point with this document, right? With Whitebox, which I also have the digest-sized softcover version of. So, of course, if you're unfamiliar with Whitebox fantasy medieval adventure game, it was cleaned up by Charlie Mason. It was kind of you can see in the introduction, he kind of talks about how he was a big fan of Swords and Wizardry Whitebox, but there was no updates ever done to it, and so he eventually made it himself with Microsoft Word, and that was really all if you're going to be one of these people that makes your own rule sets, Microsoft Word and Word documents such as that are really good starting point. I have recently downloaded Apache primarily for this reason, so that over the years I can take the rules I like and the rules I don't like and kind of compile them all within one single document for ease of reference. But that's me. So I'm going to try to get to the point with the rules. So, rule number 1, right? The most important rule in White Box is that the referee always has the right to modify the rules. In fact, it's encouraged. This is your game after all. There are gaps in the rules, holes left open on purpose, because much of the fun of the role-playing games is being able to make up rules as needed. And that's something I wanted to talk about real quick, because some of you might remember that when I posted my post I did for the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons, I included a quote from Gary Gygax in that post, in which he talks about how logic, knowledge, and reason are worth more than a dozen rule books. And that's true, because at the end of the day, GM Fiat has final say. And if I feel that taking too stern, roll for Tarako. I have White Box, but haven't gone through it yet. I'm playing around with BFRPG and Old Swords Reign. Hey, that sounds cool, brother. Hey, thank you for joining me tonight there, Roll. By the way, guys, shout out for Roll for Tarako. Go check out his channel. He's got, especially if you're into the crafting side of the hobby, he's got a lot of good stuff. But anyway, so to get to my point, and I do hope that my sound is still holding out. I've got it up on my phone. Anyway, back to my point. If we are going to, I feel that taking too hard and too firm of a stance on, quote, rules as written, in quote, would restrict that GM Fiat. After all, some of you guys might already know, but I'm not a dice fudger. Never have been, never will be. The one thing I do, but there is one caveat to that, and that is the fact that I do fudge dice rolls on things such as environmental stuff. Meaning that if I'm rolling on random tables for, not necessarily random encounters, but for like the weather, or for a hex or something like that, or if I feel like if I'm generating a dungeon and I feel like the monster that I rolled up is not befitting, I kind of just go down the list and see what would work, because I want things to work. Not every dungeon needs to be this crazy gonzo thing, right? So that's my particular take on this. But, let's just say, because I already mentioned, this is the game that I probably run the most at my personal tables, in real life. And that is, it says right there on page 4 that the referee always has the right to modify the rules. So, thanks for the shout out. Hey, you're welcome there, Roll for Tarako. Again, guys, go check them out. I do hope this is not lagging, by the way. So, the point being that my position on rules as written is to maintain a level of verisimilitude so that my world is has laws of physics. You know what I mean? That's about where it ends. I have personal preferences and personal tastes. So certain things don't work with campaigns I'm trying to run. And I'm not always in the mood for one particular kind of setting, right? I do like grim dark and undead horror kind of stuff, but I'm not always in the mood for that. Maybe I want to run a high fantasy. Maybe I want to run a low fantasy. Maybe I want to run a kind of classic Conan the Barbarian swords and sorcery kind of stuff, right? So, that's just my opinion. So, there's also, for example, and by the way, this is not exclusive to White Box, by the way. This also appears in games such as Basic Fantasy, where it says, where all of them pretty much talk about GM Fiat, and they almost all have optional rules. Mage's Musings. Rule number 1, the DM is always right. Rule number 2, in the event the DM is wrong, refer to rule number 1. That's right there, Mage's Musings, and thank you for jumping on tonight. Go check out his channel as well, by the way, guys. So, GM Fiat, and we just got done talking about GM Fiat. So, the whole thing is that you'll see a lot of these books include optional rules, and that's kind of tailor-made to it's kind of like putting together Lego blocks, right? Or Duplo, or whatever you want to use. You're doing it mostly for. Hold on, pardon me. I'm going to mute my mic for a second. Okay, sorry, I didn't want to cough into the mic. It's mostly like because you're kind of building the thing that you want to build, right? Because like because I told somebody this the other day, and that is I know my game and my style better than anybody else. So like I use the rules again as a level of verisimilitude to maintain like laws of physics and things like that in my universe at my table. But there's some rules that don't exactly work to my taste, or I feel like kind of bog down play a little bit. This is actually kind of why I like White Box so much, is because there's not a lot of that to bog things down. But all these OSR games, or the vast majority of them, will have things about optional rules and stuff like that. And by the way, this is not a commercial for White Box. This is just me using White Box as an example for things. Easy and learn to play. Rules are simple and clear. In my opinion, those are the best kind of games. Whether that's basic fantasy, whether that's White Box, whether that's OSE, you name it, whatever your particular favorite game is. As if the rules are simple and clear to you, then that is the rule set you need to go with. And if those rules do not get in the way of your game, that is the rule set that you need to do. I understand that there could be sort of a tribalism in some ways within the hobby, not just limited to OSR. In my personal opinion, I think the modern crowd has more of the tribalism going. I mean, for goodness sake, there's people you can't get off of 5e, right? But most people within our hobby are going to be kind of chill and cool about who you or what system you run with. So they all talk about like customizing the game fit the way you want to play, but if you are the referee and this is your first time running a game, then stick with the basic rules and customize later. And I tend to recommend that too, because you can find particular rules that don't necessarily mesh with your game then and there at the table. Hey, there's Steve. Hey, what's up, Steve? The rules are absolutely a great grounding, and it's best to follow them for consistency, but RPGs are a special beast, and adjudications are necessary sometimes for outliers. That's correct. So, like, they're like guidelines. Like I stated earlier, Gary Gygax himself even said, like, knowledge, reason, and logic worth more than 12 rule books, right? So, like, the whole point is not to get bogged down at the table, keep everything running as quick and smooth as possible so that your players have fun and you have fun. I mean, if somebody's not having fun, something's going wrong, right? So I do recommend on the first session trying to stick with rules as basically as possible so that you know what works and know what doesn't. But at the same time, that is not exactly going to work out totally 100% all the time. Because there'll be a rule you'll forget about, and it's much better just go ahead and roll with it, make a note of it, so that you can run it that way or not next time. So whatever keeps you flipping through the book less, right? Like, it's just like I print out reference sheets all the time for certain particular rules. Hold on, I got to cough again. I apologize if my mic cutting out is so loud. I promise it's a lot quieter than if I cough into the mic. Knowledge, reason, and logic are ancient concepts lost on many people these days. Howdy for roll for Tarako. It's been a while. There's a lot. Hey, some camaraderie tonight. I'm cool with that. So yeah, it's like, I think that's one of the reasons why I like White Box so much, is because of the fact that like I could just make little notes about things that's not covered, and then that's something I run with. Like, I have a little document about house rules, which every game kind of assumes you're going to have anyway. So let's see here. We're going to go through some of these optional rules, right? The funny part is, on this sheet, I don't think it's, if I remember right, the way it's laid out on the sheet is not the way that it's laid out in the book. Let's see here. Yep, I'm right, because it goes like strength, dex, intelligence, wisdom. Oh, Con was next. Okay. But, anyway. So here's one such optional rule, right? Like some referees allow more flexibility. One example is let the player roll 3d6 a total of 6 times and then arrange the rolls however they want. This allows players to put the best results into abilities. Here's a situation where I have a house rule on this, and a lot of the guys that I was running a Morgan's Fort campaign last year, so it was 3d6 down the line. However, on your second character, and trust me, that happened very quick because that group TPK'd in the first 10 minutes. But on the second character, you are allowed to allot your stats. Because it's kind of like my way of saying, hey, thanks for trying this, now let's do it this way. The way that I'm not totally opposed to people allotting their stats. If they have an idea of what they want to play, they are free to do that. And of course, I do the 1-for-1 basis on switching around your attribute scores, right? Homebrew or bust. Yeah, I'm all for homebrew. I'm all about homebrew. The D&D game I run is so house ruled that it's probably impossible for me to run anything by the book anymore. Right, and that brings up a good. Here's the thing. It's super rare, but there are guys that have not stopped playing since the 70s. Even when they grew up, they always had a group. They're very rare. It's like finding a unicorn. But you're talking about 40 to 50 years of them adding stuff, building their game up to suit their needs and suit their play. It's just like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, right? It's so rule heavy because it was designed for a lot of it for tournament play. There's a lot of stuff that nobody pays attention to. In fact, I'll tell you a rule that exists in basic fantasy RPG that I bet a lot of people didn't know is that there's a turning speed. There's a turning speed in the book. How many people talk about turning speed? Not a lot. So, that's a rule that I've purposefully ignored because it's just, it's a nothing thing, and I can think very little. I've got BX over there in a binder, and I have the rules cyclopedia, but I don't think they talk about turning speed. So, I could be wrong, but again, that's kind of my point. Who uses turning speed? You just kind of assume that if the target is getting hit, they're going to turn to whoever's hitting them 90 degrees and try to attack them. It's kind of a weird rule to me, but, there it is. I personally don't use it, and I don't think it hurts anything by ignoring it. Attribute modifier. So it gives, for example, this book gives, the freedom, if you want to. This is the reason why I like white boxes, because it doesn't catechize you. You are free to, hack this thing up as much as you want. And that is the same with a lot of these OSR games, right? That's kind of the cool thing about our little niche in the hobby is, we can hack and slap and chop all we want and make it into our own little thing. I have a house rule for clerics in BFRPG. I don't need it in Old Swords Reign because it's built in already. Cleric gets... Yeah, that's a good point, because I remember Labyrinth Lord is like that too. Labyrinth Lord, clerics start with level 1 spells at level 1. So, and in fact, I have another OSR game called Beneath the Sunken Catacombs, and I have it in hard copy, and I have it on my computer. Let me see if I got that anywhere real quick. Give me a minute. Which one is it? Oh, Horde Wars. Yeah, we played Horde Wars the other night. That was cool. I think that's it, ain't it? No, that's Swords and Wizardry. Okay, RPG systems. I've got them downloaded all over here. Where's Beneath the Sunken Catacombs? I could have swore I had it. I've lost it somewhere. I accidentally deleted a lot of things the other day. It was really disheartening. I've also closed out this. I'm also trying to be very careful about what I click on, because I have a lot of applications and documents with my real name on it, and some people have figured it out and some people know my real name, and I don't mind that, but I don't want it out there for everybody. Specifically because a couple of those documents do have my social security number on it, and I'd rather that not get out there. So, not many use the Gygax polearm chart either. You're right. That's cool. What's your go-to game? Or does it not matter anymore since everything is homebrew to the max? Like, that's a cool question for, because it's like, in my honest opinion, a lot of the stuff that I throw into, like, most of these games kind of supplement each other myself. So I kind of assume that's what Steve kind of does too, if he doesn't outright homebrew it. So anyway, there's an optional rule about attributes getting like, you can like make them like the BX version if you want. So anyway, let's see, let's get to my point on some things. Okay, so here's another thing too. Here's an optional thing, and I love talking about the Thief because the Thief is a good example on homebrew, right? Had a cough again. I apologize. The Thief is a good example on homebrew, right? So it's like technically not rules as written. The existence of the Thief class is kind of, it's not totally against rules as written. It's written into a way, but like, you can make homebrew work within rules as written, but like my point being that like you don't have to run so rules as written all the time. Like the rules are not so fragile that they'll topple over like a Jenga tower. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like a lot of people think that if you pull one block out, the whole thing falls apart. But to be honest with you, if the rules were like that, then everybody's game would be falling apart. My name isn't Rex. No, it's actually Brandon. Rex is actually based off of my work nickname. When I worked at the factory, it's actually a 10-year-old nickname. I was nicknamed T-Rex because I have short, little, stumpy arms. And my channel name went through several different iterations. It was the Stoic Rex at one point. No, I think it was at first Papa Rex. Then whenever I tried to get into like talk about theology and philosophy, but that never took off, it was the Stoic Rex. Then it was the Stoic Reformed Rex. And that was kind of whenever I was talking about firearms. And then my channel actually didn't take off until after I got the Kentucky Rex name. And I posted about my homebrewed dungeon for Basic Fantasy. And it just kind of went from there. I started getting more eyes. Kentucky T-Rex, that's right. That's where that name literally comes from there, mate. Yeah, indeed, don't dox yourself. Which the cool part is I did in fact get a job that I start in a couple weeks. So that CDL paid off. I was trying to avoid going OTR if I could, and luckily I won't have to do that. I do have to drive 2 counties over, but so here's something that I would probably change, right? So here's the rules as written thing. Cleric Rex, Fighting Rex, Rogue Rex, yeah. I decided I wanted to represent my state a little bit because literally the only people that comes to the top of my mind is like Larry Elmore and Jeff Easley. Those are the only two that I can think of representing my state in the hobby, and I kind of wanted to take up that mantle a little bit. I'm sure there's more Kentuckians that play this game. I know for a fact there are, but it doesn't seem like very many of them break into the mainstream, you know what I mean? And to be honest with you, a couple of those guys come from northern Kentucky, not exactly my neck of the woods. Almost like a different state. But here's a rule that I would probably change, right? And here's a caveat. So there's no neutral clerics, right? Well, I like to let my players have like druids and stuff. And a druid is kind of a neutral-ish kind of character. So like I would change that to, but you know, it would be like, I would definitely differentiate between a cleric and a druid. So while the no neutral cleric could be true, I would definitely do neutral Druid. So I normally call them nature clerics too. Oh hey, give me a second here. Oh hey, Ray. I want to respond to Ray's question real quick. Once I can get this loaded up, and I'll get back to it. I don't know if Ray's watching or not, and he can easily watch me. So I finally got that up and running for the day. Hey dude, good to see you. Nice questions and answers. Oh, okay. I thought he had a question. I apologize, guys. So anyway, thank you for your patience. I know I'm kind of rambling and kind of going, but I haven't streamed in a while, so I'm kind of like indulging myself just a little bit. I've actually got quite a few people. No neutral clerics unless the ref says otherwise, which means it's still technically within the purview of Raw. Yeah, that's true. Elmore easily make up some good representation. They do. They definitely do. But we haven't had anybody since them that pops off the top of my head, right? I think Blackwall is from Kentucky. Last time I checked. I don't know. I gotta ask him. I'm pretty sure he is. He's in my Discord. He ain't played with us yet, but anyway. So like, this is kind of like, so we talked about the purview of, so Mage brought up the purview of Raw, right? So like, you can have a chaotic cleric, and like instead of having turn undead, like you can control undead. And like instead of destroying them outright, like they'd be turned outright. You know, on your side they'd be servitors. Well, it talks about that talks about that just down here. Kind of forgot that part. Fighters, which I like to play with the fighter class a lot. The fighter is a very good basic class that you can kind of play around with. Paladins, for example. In my little house ruled game, I allow people to become paladins at 3rd level. That way they can now a 3rd level fighter becoming a paladin means that he's a 3rd level fighter that's a 1st level cleric. Now here's how I balance that a bit. If he's going to go that route, where is it? Because there's this ability called Combat Fury, right? So in order to balance that, in my opinion, I take away that so that they can, because they can now turn undead. 2 levels lower, but they can now turn undead. And then at level 4, they can get a 1st level cleric spell. That's how I do it. They represent the state much better than the blue people. Yeah, I know, right? I like to talk about the blue people every now and then. It's just like Cocaine Bear, the blue people, and Colonel Sanders, of course, which I live in the hometown of KFC, like the birthplace of it, down here in Corbin. Well, I don't technically live in Corbin, but I'm just outside of it. Nice little quiet place. We actually have a fun little fact. We actually have a spot commemorated on the sidewalk where he shot a gas station robber. Because that's what small towns do. We also have Cumberland Falls, which in my opinion is more impressive. I love our natural features down here. Oh yeah, that's something too I forgot to talk about. Let's go back up to the top here. Let's go back to the attributes, because I just now thought of it because of dexterity, right? So now dexterity kind of implies that everybody can get like a modified armor class, right? Now that's not the same with strength, because strength in this game is pretty much straightforward. But it is a little ambiguous. Right? Ambiguous. I can't talk tonight apparently. That fighters can use their strength bonus to modify their 2-hit and damage results when using melee weapons. It doesn't say that every class can do that. So what do? Well, I won't let the strength bonus affect damage on a non-fighter, but I will allow it to modify their 2-hit. That's a personal little thing. have no room to judge anyone because I live in Alabama. Blue people, what have you guys got against Smurfs exactly? Yeah, if you're unfamiliar with the blue people of the hills, I'm not going to spoil anything, but that's definitely a Google search you need to do. So, okay, here's another thing too, and here's probably the one of the more controversial ones to some people. In my opinion, I think it's a whole bunch of ado about nothing, right? Like a lot of people get all qualmish and touch us about this, and I don't really understand why. And that is the level cap. You have some people that are so hardcore one way and so hardcore the other way. Uh, like I personally don't think it matters. Um, I just kind of go with whatever because this is easy to house rule. Can't They are typically allowed to advance as high as 6th level. Typically, that's a little bit of there's some wiggle room. So like you can take them up to in white box the cap out is 10, but you can easily do some math or get the charts from another game to supplement to bring them up to 20th level, right? And beyond that. Like you can get up to level 36 in the Rule Cyclopedia, right? In BECME. And beyond that too. Then you get into Immortal play, but I've never really heard of anybody playing Immortal, right? There are family people with an odd genetic defect that gives their skin an odd blue tint. They all live in the same area of rural. Yeah, there's like generations of that. It's pretty specific to that version. Only fighters can allow modifications because dice and modifiers were kept so small. Plus one, the dice was a massive modifier. It really was. Because especially in these kind of games right here, like specifically like OD&D clones, the penalty and bonus are all within like this area. Like you have to roll extremely high or extremely low, which in my opinion, I like that a lot because that kind of implies that everybody's like a normal person. There's nothing inherently special about them. What they do in the game earns them that hero status. So that's kind of why I like that particular thing. And I also like having D6 hit dice for everybody. Like the fact that the players only need a D20 and a D6, I like that a lot. So in 44 years of running and playing, I've never used it, and it never seemed to make any difference. We're talking about Immortals. That's because the Immortal rules were ass. Yeah, they were kind of they were stupid. I've got a copy of the PDF on that, and it's really I can't disagree. There's a part of me that wants to run that high level, and a part of me that don't, because I just know it would turn into a real, like it would be just a cluster. So, anyway, letting demi-humans advance to the same amount of levels as humans, like I'm not opposed nor necessarily in favor of it. It just depends on my particular kind of how I want the campaign to feel, right? Like if I want like high magic-y kind of stuff, then I don't really put like I allow them to keep climbing. For my personal homebrew table, and I'll pull out my document here in a little bit, but I keep things at level limits. I actually run pretty close to the book with very little tinkering on my home table, but I do like to play around with things. So it's not like I'm like a hardcore rules as written. No, that's not how. Like I just kind of play around with it, and however we run. If I want a higher fantasy style setting, I take that limit away. There is also kind of the weird thing about the elf. So for those of you that are not, I would think that everybody's familiar with OD&D by now, but just in case, elves used to have to choose every day whether they were going to be fighters or magic users. So they had to make a choice every day. This game allows the elf variant, which is if you play Basic Expert and any of the derived OSR retro clones based upon that, you'll be familiar with this, and that is it's basically the multi-class of the elf, and it talks about the weapons and armor restrictions. And I do take this is the thing that I take as a suggestion from the book, the referee limiting the elf to chainmail, so that you essentially have a magic user with chainmail, but it won't work with full plate, because at least with chainmail you can still kind of move around. You know what I mean? It's not like plate mail, where it's like super restricted, especially at the joints. So I do keep that, and I do like this William McAuslin art a lot. So halflings, I don't think I really tinker with them much. They're pretty straightforward, but then again, I don't have very many people choose a halfling. Coin weight, I'm going to try to get to some of the more. Here's a question for you guys. Are you guys AC or ascending or descending guys? I'm personally partial to Thaco myself. Oh, Ray's in here. What's up, Ray? The quest for immortality was laid out in the Master Rules of Crazy 2. One of them had you starting again as level 1, making it level 36, and getting back to 36. Ray, how's it going? Hey, Mage, pretty good. Hey, Ray, how's it going? Claricon. Hey, we got ourselves a regular little posse in here. Hey, I'm cool with seeing Ray join us tonight, too. It's been a while since he's caught one of these streams. Now all we need is Fred, and I think we'll have the OG gang here. So, I'm personally partial to descending AC myself. I don't think the math is really that difficult. It's literally ascending, but in reverse. So I don't really typically have a problem with that. But again, I understand some people would rather use ascending. So I'm cool with that. And like, I think, in my opinion, a lot of OSR games would benefit from having both. Just like White Box does, and a lot of them do include both. So it's just all a matter of taste. I've always thought that the descending armor class, because you have people that act like it's the hardest thing in the world, but in my opinion, it's really not. Some people say it's just not that intuitive. Okay, I can see where, because you're thinking in reverse. But, in my personal opinion, I just don't think it's that big of a deal. Let's see, anything in this section? As easy as it is to use ascending, I use the old way just because I'm a grognard and I'm set in my ways. White box for Mag Talk, huh? It is technically not. We're actually talking about rules as written, but I've kind of turned this into, I guess, a white box talk, right? But like, I'm kind of using white box as my example, and how like you don't necessarily have to make yourself slavishly attach yourself to rules as written as a philosophy, because a lot of these games, they're not like Jenga towers. It's not like if you remove one thing, the whole thing falls apart. Because there's some people in our hobby that act like that exaggerate it to that, and I think it's an over-exaggerated little trope. I really don't think it's that big of a deal myself. I don't understand, but this is actually kind of me like cleansing myself a little bit too, because I was one of those guys not long ago. So this is kind of me publicly saying, look, my views have changed. Here's how they've changed. So, like, I've learned to chill out. You know what I mean? So, because it was mostly from a question somebody had about whether or not some of my views remain the same on things, and I think that video finally published a little bit ago. So, like, hopefully, because I had that on my mind after I started talking about it, you know what I mean? Let's be partial to descending myself. I do understand the noobs and their used to. People on the net over exaggerating, no, saying ain't so right. I've had Gonerman go off on me about how difficult it is to do THAC0 and such. Kind of weird, but okay. Yeah, I saw that. It was on your Basic Fantasy RPG review. I remember thinking that was a little odd, but he kind of got on to me about like the use of AI prompts for private use, not necessarily to write, because I disagreed with the idea that, because it stemmed from my buddy posting in Facebook some of the prompts, like explaining to some people how he uses AI as prompts, and that, like, I kind of was trying to take up from my buddy in that post, and then it kind of spiraled, and it was, I think they kind of made a big deal about nothing on that one, but that's me. I remember there's a funny little rule about movement in here, and that is normal movement speed. Here we go. Right here. Allowing for 2 moves per turn for base movement, right? So I always thought I always missed that particular paragraph. So basically what that means is, let's say you're moving normally, let's say you're not encumbered at all. So you're in this little range right here. Let's say you're an elf or a human and you can move 12, right? So instead of moving 120 feet, you would actually move 240 feet. I remember thinking that was weird, because like I printed off one of those reference sheets from the Smoldering Wizard WordPress website, because he had a lot of resources for Whitebox on it, and I wanted something that was quick and easy access for like consulting with my players on things. And I saw that as a footnote, and I was like, what? And I had to go back and read the rules, and I was like, oh, that's where he got that. THAC0 is easy, and it's less math in the long run than ascending. Yeah, he's an odd dude in some ways. Yeah, I remember that, Ray. Hey, mate, agree, Mage. I tried real hard to be nice. Yeah, I try to be hard to be. I tried to be nice. Yeah, AI is a touchy subject. Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, because a lot of people, especially solo players, like to use AI for their prompts. And in my personal opinion, I don't think it's any different than anybody using tables. That's me. That's my opinion. That's kind of what I was getting at. It kind of went rough. It kind of got a little weird. So I stepped away from that conversation. I thought people were being too hardcore one way about it or the other. So that's me. Anything else on like optional rules? Because I'm mostly going by the optional rules in a lot of things. Aha, here we go, the combat sequence. So that's cool. So you have different forms of combat sequence, right, in this book. They give you a couple different ones to pick and choose from. My personal ones is, I like to use this one, the alternative combat sequence. And we'll get to that here in a minute. So like, and to be honest with you, you don't have to use any of these. Like, you can make up your, because initiative is kind of a weird thing in our hobby anyway. A lot of people are getting away from it and replacing it with something else. I know a couple of guys who use playing cards and seeing who draws the highest value on that and going from there. So is it much different than rolling dice? Not really, but yeah, a lot of people are getting away from that, and some people do especially when it comes to, because here's how I do it. In simultaneous combat, while the damage is all taken at the same time, I let the players move first in that sequence. So I give player priority. And then when their turn is done, even if they kill the monster, of course, this is simultaneous combat, so the monsters are still going to attack as well. Now, of course, some people, they don't even like to have simultaneous combat, and that's totally cool. That's all up to you. But this is my particular favorite one, and that is where it goes, where you roll for surprise, you roll for initiative. Hold on, excuse me for a second. I'm going to mute my mic. I apologize. Anyway, So you roll for surprise, and you roll for initiative, and then it goes like magic, and then missile, then melee, and then finally movement. And what I do in this sequence is if the spellcaster is going to be preparing another spell, he doesn't move. He's used his movement to prepare another spell. That's how I go for it. Now, in terms of missile weapons, when it comes to bows, you can fire and then move. But if you've got a crossbow, if you are going to reload a bolt, you are using your movement. That's my particular house rule. Oh, I gotta mute again. So, hey, have a good night there, Steve. Yeah, I'm going to try not to make this too long myself. I'm going to try not to make this take too long, but I haven't done a stream in a while, and I kind of figured people were just happy to see it. Like, I've got me a nice little fan base here. It's not too big. It's not too little. Enough people get on to see it, and I think personally it's mostly to hear my dialect myself. Okay, all right, I've talked about that, and then I talked about my little house rule on the movement. The attack roll, and that all comes back to whether or not you use the AC. Okay, so here's another one. And you'll see this in most OSR games nowadays, and that is the less harsh method for death. Because some people don't like I've never been hardcore about this one way or the other. Personally, I use 0 HP equals dead. And but when it comes to poison, it depends on the animal involved. Hold on, I gotta mute again. Okay, pardon me. So, like, when it depends on the animal and the creature's poison involved. So, like, let's say, for example, you got bit by a normal black widow, right? Like, not a giant one, just a normal everyday. The chances of you dying are going to be way less likely to happen. So I play around with that myself. Your character is going to have like flu-like symptoms. I've also homebrewed brown recluses before, because I did that whole thing where I based a lot of the wildlife and monsters off of Kentucky wildlife and stuff like that. And so we have brown recluses like a lot of states in the South, right? And brown recluses, their reputation is overhyped. I'm telling you right now, I've been bitten by one before. And while yes, it is a fairly nasty bite, as long as you wash it, you'll be all right. And like some Neosporin and you'll be okay. So like, yeah, I have a scar, but it's not a huge deal. So if the characters find a brown recluse in the wild and they get bit by it, they're going to have a nasty little sore. It's probably going to take away from their... Okay, so with the Blackwood, I would take away like a point of constitution until they got better, because it would be like 1d6 days for me. But for like a brown recluse, that one's a little different, because brown recluse bite side effects kind of last a while, a pretty rough while. Mine healed after like a month. It looked ugly, but it wasn't infected. Like, you could tell where like some of the meat was starting to rot, but it wasn't like seriously bad. Like, I kept it clean, and that's what they really stress. Keep it clean, and it'll be all right. Most of the really nasty bites you see on the internet are usually due to some form of MRSA, and that can come from the creature's fangs. So... if I was bit by Scarlett Johansson, I'd be fine. Oh, that's funny. Oh, buddy. That's a rib tickler. But, so like, I would probably take away from like strength. But like, with every sickness you can recover. So like, maybe that character's going to be out of commission. So, but here's a house rule I do. I allow people to roll 2 to 3 to 4 characters, really. You can have as many characters as you want. In fact, I encourage it a lot. So, like, if you have one character that's obviously not going to be up for the next dungeon go around, well, he's going to miss out on the treasure. So, you can take the other characters that you got. You know what I mean? So, that's just kind of how I do. You probably wonder what I do for retainers. And really, I just roll normal old retainers anyway. Some of them have really stupidly good stats. I remember Brian in my group, he ended up getting a fighter with 18 strength. And I was like, doggone, he got a really good retainer on that one. So, I mean, it just all comes down to how I feel like running it. Binding Wounds, that's another one. I like that option, especially for lower magic settings. But I rule it to where, and they rule it like this too. So I guess you could say this is sort of rules as written. Like, you can only use it once per encounter, and it will never heal more than what you had before the encounter. So, like, you could get, let's say you had 5 HP, you took damage, you're down to 2. Let's say you roll the D6, you get a, let's say you get a 4. Well, you only had 5 before the fight, so you're not going to get 6 HP. You're only going to get that 5 back. So, or if you rolled a 1, you got 3 back, you can't bind again until the next encounter. So that's just how I do it. Let's see how. Anything else? I use morale all the time, man. I love that mechanic so much. Whenever I got, because I'm kind of a newer comer to this hobby, so I didn't exactly grow up with these games like a lot of folks did. And I was introduced through 5e, but whenever I found out about this morale stuff over here, I went for that. Oh, and I forgot about the jousting rules. I've never used them myself, but that's cool. Spells, saving throws. Saving throw matrix, which is based on the BX. That's if you decide to forego the one saving throw. Now, spells are always the best because they are usually left to interpretation anyway. Like level 6 cleric spells, only the gods know. Well, let's do they exist? We'll find out, I guess, right? Because I like to play around with stuff, and I think that's the fun of this hobby, is just playing around with stuff and coming up with stuff on your own. So I don't recall anything being super vague in this, but that could be because I've run it so much that I have a particular way. So I guess because I did have this come up one time, and that is a lawful cleric, whether he would bless or curse somebody. Would a lawful cleric curse anyone? And I ruled no. That it was. I ruled in one that it was no, but in another setting I ruled yes, because while I believe that, because in my settings one of my settings, gods are like really, like there was like a pantheon, so like it was different. Whereas with the other one, it was like more like a monotheistic kind of religion. So it was like the Judeo-Christian tradition, where you have God, the Almighty, who, in addition to blessing, he also curses, he judges and stuff like that. And that's actually kind of what I favor now. So I do favor this kind of option because I like, because I'm kind of a church history nut anyway, and I'm a Christian, and I don't apologize for that. So if you're not, hey, more power to you. I'll pray for you, whether you like it or not. And yeah, that's just kind of how I am. The repeated 20 still only hit a certain maximum. For example, if you have THAC0 of 20, best AC you can hit is -5. So assuming no modifiers, -6 AC would be impossible to hit for you. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that being kind of up in the air too. Like, because I've always heard some people run it to where like a 20 will always hit as long as, but we're getting into like, when you're talking about negative numbers, you are talking about more magical kind of armor to begin with. And so would that magical armor take damage from mundane weaponry anyway? So would a nat 20 hit that? And I've seen people go back and forth on that, mostly because it came down to setting, whether or not the magical armor protected from mundane weapons in and of themselves, or if they just simply had higher defenses, while being magical, of course. So here's, because I talked about this earlier, right? Um, because one of the reasons why I like these games, especially white box, is because they don't catechize you. Like, you can literally just like pick and choose and switch and swap. Running a game of white box is a lot easier than running most other role playing games, simply because there's not many rules and your discretion overrides them anyway. So that's kind of how I am with that. Players in combat with a group of orcs and the fighter wants to trip one of them. It's up to the referee to decide what the fighter needs to do to roll to be successful. Now, I used to have, and I wish I still had it downloaded, but I do have it printed off somewhere, of Matt Finch's OSR primer, right? And if anybody's not read it, it is on my must read, because it does kind of orient yourself, where he talks about a character that's going over the banister, like attacking some. And I've used that example with a lot of people on, am I allowed to do this? Well, yeah, you could do that. Well, what do I roll? Just do it. And I'll roll over here. You can roll over there. And I'll interpret the results based upon that. Now, of course, they hit the AC, they're going to hit. But while I'm rolling, okay, let's say he hits. He hits the goblin at the bottom of the balcony, right? And I roll a certain way, and I'm going to interpret that roll means that the sword is so embedded in the goblin's skull that he's going to have trouble getting it out for the buddies of the goblin coming running down the hallway. Or if he misses, but like my dice roll over on this end is a certain way, I'm going to say, okay, you missed, but you did knock him over, so you didn't actually hit him. So now he's prone, but you are too. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I go. I'm a cleric, and I snuck into my background that I'm a follower of the unknown God. If it's my own game, then it's God. Yeah, like, I always, because I've got a Beckman game myself where the church in B2 is very Judeo-Christian, based heavily. Because the cool thing is, we got one of the players in that group, he's actually a new convert. When he joined our Discord, he was kind of one of those Viking bros, you know, like, I worship Odin and that kind of thing. And he converted to Christianity. He became a Roman Catholic. And so, like, he's all about that now. And, like, well, I'm not Catholic myself. Hey, more power to him. So, like, he's all about playing clerics in a very Christian missionary kind of way. So that's what I've allowed him to do. And I kind of went along with it too, because, like, in my opinion, a lot of times I don't necessarily make up religions beforehand. I try to keep my stuff very light so that I could build upon them later. But, you know, that's just me. So, like, here's, like, at the end of the day, this is what matters the most, is, like, any system that frees up your creativity in terms of customizing the game. So, like, who says it's not rules as written if you decide to homebrew or house rule things? Like, I just don't, because there's dudes out there in the hobby that are all about, you have to be to the letter. And I'm just not that way, because my personal opinion, who's got time for that? You know what I mean? It's already hard enough to try to get a group together. So, like, you know, that's just me. And really, I can't, most of this is just like the bestiary and stuff now, treasure tables. But, like, you know, this is something I think needs to be included with every OSR game, because I like it a lot. And that is the house rules section. I believe that every OSR game or every RPG game in general should have a house rules page in the back for jotting down notes, because like it assumes that you're going to tinker with this anyway. Let me bring up my particular house rules here. So I use Apache because I'm too cheap to buy Microsoft Word. So this is my white box house rules. So here's how I tinkered with it. There's not much tinkering going on. Basically, if somebody showed up with a book in their hand, it wouldn't really be like learning another language, right? So okay, I've lost my saving throw versus the lure of my bed. Time to retire. Good night, everyone. Hey, good night, Mage. I appreciate you joining us tonight. So many ways to adjudicate that stuff, which is awesome. Yeah, there's so much way, because again, there's a lot of things I take for granted because I like, especially with the spell descriptions, because like I have rolled it a certain way for so long that for whatever reason it's just second nature of me to remember it that way. So here's my personal little house rules, right? Here's the ones that for my table. Oh yeah, this one. I need to update this one, but here's what the original one is. Fighter class is the only class to receive the bonus to hit and to damage. For strength, all other classes will receive the penalty, which I need to update because that's not necessarily the way I play it anymore. Dexterity grants armor class bonuses and penalties to all classes, because like the wording kind of makes that ambiguous in the rules. So like I just said, yeah, it grants it. So like if you're used to that from another system, okay, it's not going to be different here. Players, and plus like you were talking about a modifier of 1 anyway. So that really only matters very much at early levels. Because like you're going to get like better armor. Even there's even magical items that'll help mages. You know what I mean? So players individually make the choice to roll the d6. This is my personal little one. Players can individually make the choice, so they're not going to speak for the whole group, to roll the d6 for hit points or to take a guaranteed 4 hit points. And I base that off of the hit die average, right? So on a d6 it's 3.5, and I decided that okay, 4. Now if I was playing basic fantasy or something of that iteration, where a fighter, for example, has a d8, he can either take the chance, roll the d8, or because it's a 4.5 on an average on a d8, he can either take a roll from the d8 or he can take a guaranteed 5 hit points. Likewise with the magic user and the thief. You can either have chance it on the d4, or you can have a guaranteed 3 hit points because it's a average of 2.5. So anyways, players have that choice, and that's what I do at my tables. And I don't think, that's just a house rule, and I don't think that breaks anything. And to be honest with you, when you're talking about level 1 and you're talking about save or die poison, and you're talking about almost everything in this particular system doing d6 damage anyway, does having full 6 HP really make that much of a difference? Not really. So here's another one for magic user. Magic users start with a spell book and 3 spells. Read magic and 2 of the player's choice. Clerics also start with a holy symbol and holy water. Thieves can thieves start play with thieves' tools and a dagger. Fighters start with 1 weapon of their choice and a helmet. And I'll get to the helmets here in a little bit because there's no rules about the helmets in White Box. So at level 10 or maximum possible level, PCs do not have to retire but will not exceed level 10 until their class chart shows otherwise. So that's basically for my more lower fantasy game. I do like that art. Number 6, this one is one that we take for granted because in White Box it doesn't necessarily say, but daggers can be thrown for 10 feet. Daggers are a mage's best friend, especially in BX, because when you run out of pew-pews, you want to have some throwing knives. And a dagger is a very useful tool anyway. Like, as somebody that carries a knife for many different reasons, like, knives come in handy. Knives are a really useful tool. So number 7, helmets grant no AC, but they can be sacrificed to avoid damage on a hit. This also applies to the shield. So if you decide you want to sacrifice your shield, you can do that, like, to avoid the damage on a hit. So once used in this way, the helmet and or shield is removed from the PC's inventory. So combat resolves as follows. This was my ruling based upon the different initiative orders. So combat resolves as follows: roll surprise, roll initiative, cast spells, decide if preparing a spell, missile weapons fired, decide if crossbows need reloading, melee movement. If spells are being prepared or crossbows are being loaded, the character is not able to move. If casters are hit, because it doesn't say anything about casters being hit in White Box. If casters are hit before the spell is cast, the caster rolls a save, I allow them a save, and applies the relevant bonus, intelligence or wisdom, if they have that bonus, or even if they have that penalty. But, I mean, why would you want to do that? But if failed, the spell fizzles out. It's lost. Bandages can be purchased for 1 silver piece. They can bind wounds once per encounter. It heals 1d6, but never more than what the character's HP was before the encounter. And then, of course, number 10, and this is more meant for, like, more homebrewy weird stuff, and that is, of course, spell research. White Box doesn't cover it, but Basic Fantasy, OSE, and all them that are based off of Moldvay, that they all have this rule in it. So this is based on that. But, you know, kind of do my own little thing with it. Spell research can be done with 250 gold pieces per spell level from a spell book. This price is doubled to 500 gold pieces spell level for spells that are unknown. So they can try to study and think and reflect upon, like, the arcane knowledge and come up with a spell from the spell book, from the spell section, which I'll roll randomly. But they have to pay 500 gold pieces for it. But I usually put things in for people to learn spells easier than that. So don't think I'm, like, really restricting magic users, because I'm not. They generally have a good opportunity to learn more spells. There's a 5% chance per spell level of failure to learn the spell. If the PC has a bonus to the relevant prime requisite, this chance of failure falls to 2%. So that's kind of what I do on my own little thing, right? So I believe I'm going to be finishing up. So I want to figure out how I want to close this out, because this has all been me ripping off the top of my head anyway. Good night, Ray, by the way. I see you're leaving too. But I'm getting ready to hit to bed anyway. My girlie normally goes 4 days a week because she goes to private school, but we had that big Arctic blast come through last month. They have to have one makeup day every month for the next couple months, so that they don't eat into their summer vacation. Okay, so how do I want to close this out? Okay. Don't let people who have never sat at your table influence you in any way to dictate how you run your games. This all comes back to the question on, is there an intrinsically wrong way to play a game? That depends on the question and the topic being asked. For example, if you are playing in a way that questions the GM's motives or plans or anything of that nature, then yes, you are playing wrong. If you are playing in such a way that really comes down to GM fiat versus the letter, no, you're not. You'll have a lot of guys that tell you there will be. These dudes are luckily a very minority group of people within the hobby, right? So it ain't like they're all over the place. They exist, but you're not likely to run into them. And this kind of comes down to like the same thing about like, because I'm going to address the elephant in the room, and that is like the Jenny D video I made last year, where I said nobody should take advice from somebody who goes on hiatus every 3 sessions. So in that regard, nobody should take GM advice seriously from people who are trying to turn the game into something it frankly wasn't. Now, that came about from my video last year on wargaming, because like I was super convinced that this should eventually become a war game, but it doesn't ever have to be. I think if you want this to turn into a war game at level 10, you should have that option. You should have those rules. You can run them however you want that. If you want them to be a war game, you absolutely have the right to, and you can if you want to. But you do not have to turn this game into a war game. So yes, I am going to be kind of crawling back on my point on that too. I was hardcore about that last year. Not so much this year. Like my perspective on this has changed. If you're playing with a player versus GM mentality, you're playing it wrong. Yeah. So yeah, if you're playing player versus GM, now we also need to define terms, because as Rolf Traco has pointed out, if you're playing with a player versus GM attitude, you're playing it wrong. That is true. We also need to differentiate between it being a player versus GM or being the GM simply providing a challenge, because a lot of people have that mentality. And we also need to differentiate with that being, because I remember what kind of irked me a bit was when there was this video about the Tomb of Horrors, Gygax's AD&D module that was meant for tournament play, and there was people that were actually using it in their adventure. And while you can use it in your adventure, I highly discourage it. You can if you want, but it's a meat grinder, and it's a meat grinder for a reason. It's because it wasn't meant for personal tables. It was meant for tournament play, because that was designed to be a GM versus player challenge module. It was Gygax literally making a meat grinder so his players could figure it out and think outside the box with a very extremely lethal module. That being said, as a GM, you also have a responsibility, and when you do things on purpose that result in hurt feelings at the table, probably not a good look. But players also need to realize when it's a difference between the player versus GM mentality, or when it's simply the roles didn't favor you that night. I am a very big fan of random tables. Do I believe you need to roll random tables all the time? Absolutely not. I don't think you need to roll a table on everything. For example, most of my dungeons come about from my mind. I talk about this with people all the time because a lot of people complain about certain dungeons being too boxy, being too blocky. Unfortunately, as a former factory mechanic who has stared at blueprints until he turned blue in the vase, I'm here to tell you that unfortunately that's just the way people build things. It's much easier for people to build things very blocky. While yes, that does look boring as a dungeon map, it is simply how people build things. Now, just because it's blocky doesn't mean it has to be linear, but we're getting into a different topic on that. Basically, don't view this as a Jenga tower. Don't view it as if I take away this block, everything else is going to fall, because I promise you it's not like a Jenga tower, it's more like a Lego tower. Because even if you were able to get one of the bricks out, it won't come tumbling down, I promise you. These games were designed, at least games like White Box, Basic Fantasy, OSC, Osric, Hyperborea and stuff like that, based on these older editions, they are not going to fall apart if you take things out, because the rules that they were based on were built in a way for kind of modular design anyway. 5e would have been like that too, because the original plan was for the rules to be modular. And then somewhere down the line between the pre-release and the official release of 5e, that fell apart to where, okay, no, there's definitely a setting and there's definitely a hardcore rules as written attitude to the rule set, to where there's like detail on every blade of grass. Don't fret the blade of grass, fret the hill that it's sitting on. You know what I mean? That kind of comes back to my mapping too. A lot of people stress too much about maps, the details of maps, what's the specific distance, but you don't really need to be that specific. You can have some ambiguity. Fill in the blanks. Anyway, I'm rambling. I've taken enough of your time. You've been very patient with me. I want to thank all my viewers tonight. Roll for Tarako. Check out his channel, especially if you're into the crafty part of the hobby. He's very much into that. Mage's Musings. Check out his channel as well. I'm another long-term subscriber to him. Check out, of course, Retro DM Ray. Ray and I are friends. I've got him on Facebook. So like we occasionally talk and we occasionally have back and forth. Like I'm on Discord. We need to play one day, dude. But you know, good luck with that, right? Because it's a lot of time. You got to sit down. But in all things, take care. God bless, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye bye.